recorded now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Middle East Dialogue 2024. This year, we're hosting this conference at Villanova University, Philadelphia. And welcome back to our afternoon session. Our first presenter is Saha Kamis. She's Associate Professor of Communication from University of Maryland, College Park. And she's going to present the socio-political dynamics of American Muslim discourses in the digital age. Let's welcome Saha.
Thank you so much. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you in the Middle East Dialogue Conference, which I always am proud of participating in every single year. And I'm going to talk today about the digitalization of American Muslim voices, the political, social, and religious implications of American Muslim discourses in the digital age. So let's start with talking about the modern Muslim identities in the digital age, the expansion of diasporic Muslim communities in many parts of the world, especially in the West, was paralleled by the simultaneous explosion in new communication technologies in recent years. These complex and parallel processes created new realities and invited new dynamics in the religious, political, social, and cultural spheres. They also gave birth to a number of unprecedented opportunities, challenges, and paradoxes, which deserve in-depth analysis. And that's what we're trying to cover together this afternoon. So let's start by talking about the internet-enabled dynamics. The internet created a global transnational community in a way which no media source has been able to establish before, because it significantly reduced both national and international boundaries thanks to its borderless nature. This helped create a new global virtual community in a way which is unmatched by other media sources. Therefore, it played a significant role in the recreation of an imagined global ummah, and the term ummah means Muslim community, as well as reshaping the identities of Muslim minorities living abroad in the diaspora, including, of course, in the United States. By doing so, it became a key player in transforming the actual Muslim communities and changing them into imagined communities in cyberspace, or so-called virtual ummah in cyberspace, as Gary Bunt and others have written about. So when we talk about digital media and diasporic Muslim communities, we talk about a number of important roles and functions that digital media has been playing. They acted as catalysts that paved the way for change, amplifiers for the call for reform, and platforms for self-expression, channels for communication and networking, bridge builders between religious scholars and their followers, between the virtual world and the real world, avenues for civic engagement and participation, and arenas for new forms of non-traditional religious authority. So as you can see, cyberspace or the internet and internet-enabled applications have offered all of these different functions for Muslim communities in the diaspora. So American Muslims are a growing force. There is a growing number of Muslims in America, a growing Muslim community in the United States, which is currently estimated at around 4 million. And Islam is expected to become the second largest religion in the United States soon. The strength of the American Muslim community is rooted in its own diversity and hybridity, its youthful and young population, and its attraction to new converts. There is a new rise also, new rising stars in the field of American politics. Slowly but surely, we are seeing more Muslim politicians entering national as well as local elections and playing important role in politics. One very important form of discourses and actions that has been taking place in cyberspace is reinventing Islamic authority online through multiple services which are offered through different Islamic websites, such as providing fatwa or religious advice, audio and video lectures by prominent Muslim figures, religious counseling and advice, articles about Islam, religious sermons, and audio Quranic recitations. Among other religious services, the internet paved the way for the reconstruction and reinvention of innovative forms of Islamic authority in cyberspace, which link the local and the global, the old and the new, the traditional and the modern. And that's something that myself and my co-author Muhammad al-Nawawi have written about in our first book, Islam.com, Contemporary Islamic Discourses in Cyberspace. That was our first co-authored book that was published in 2009 and talked about the creation of these different discourses between Muslims and other Muslims, as well as Muslims and non-Muslims in cyberspace. The dilemma of online religious authority. This poses the big question around religious authority, which is basically, quote unquote, who speaks for Islam? In the age of cyberspace, amid this cacophony of mostly identiless or anonymous voices, ijtihad becomes very important. Ijtihad is the reinterpretation of religious text. Since ijtihad in the context of these forums has opened the door for lay people with hardly any religious knowledge or qualifications in some cases to frame the agenda and issues around Islam and Muslims, that becomes a dilemma which is controversial. This phenomena spilled over from local to global spheres, posing wide implications and challenges for diasporic Muslim communities. In other words, it's not like everyone you hear or see on social media is necessarily a graduate of a traditional, Orthodox Muslim institution. Some of them are just lay people who are improvising and trying to give their own side of the story, which of course may not always be accurate or authoritative. New features of Islamic digital authority in cyberspace. It is safe to argue that the digital age is changing the way we are looking at Islamic authority and how it could be best defined. I argue that we are currently witnessing a shift in the direction of Islamic authority from the local to the global, from the top down to the bottom up, and from the centralized to the decentralized, from the traditional to the modern, from the conventional to the unconventional, and from the elitist to the grassroots. These shifts are aided by internet-based applications, especially social media, which act as catalysts and amplifiers for new ideas. When I co-authored the first book, Islam.com, in 2009, one of the most important findings was the clear void and obvious shortage in Islamic scholars who were able to participate online, in many cases because of lack of digital literacy or technological skills or technological savviness. There was also a clear shortage in moderators who can facilitate the discussions in many of these Islamic websites. This is not the case, of course, anymore. We are now in 2024, as we are witnessing an unprecedented surge in Muslim voices online, some of which could be considered controversial or even unorthodox, and some of them, of course, remain to be within the conventional, traditional realms of Islamic religious knowledge. Here is one example. This young lady, Rifqa Sajida, she is actually defining herself as an Orthodox convert to Islam who is disabled and queer Sunni Muslim. So you can see the hybridity, right? And the unorthodox, even controversial, unconventional identity that she is presenting herself with on digital media and social media. And she started to post her own videos as a woman who is wearing the niqab or the face veil. She has her own YouTube channel and has her own following on social media. My colleague Anna Piella actually came up with the interesting term digital niqabosphere, which talks about how niqabi women, i.e. women who are wearing the niqab or the face veil, started to use different social media applications like Instagram, TikTok, Flickr, YouTube, Reddit, you name it, in order to present their own identities and their own side of the story and to speak for themselves to a large international global audience. Another thing I want to talk about is mediated Islamic feminism online. Muslim women are globally using the internet not just as a window to see the rest of the world while being seen by the rest of the world, but also as a tool or sometimes even a weapon to fight back against the many attempts to sideline them, profile them, stigmatize them, and silence them. Their efforts to deploy digital media as a platform that gives voice to the voiceless was clearly evident in the three functions that many of these women that I interviewed in different occasions have been constantly talking about. The functions of education, educating society, making it more aware of their own needs and claims and desires and agendas, documentation, documenting everything that's happening in their lives, and mobilization, trying to start grassroots movements of like-minded people, which many of them engage in as part of the rising phenomena that we can describe as Islamic feminism and Islamic cyber feminism. So these are Muslim women using the internet and using cyberspace and social media and digital media to present their own side of the story and to present a form of feminism which is different from the conventional Western model of feminism. Expressing diverse gendered identities, blending tradition and modernity. There are a number of interesting examples we can also talk about among the American Muslim community in cyberspace. One of them is the online hijabistas, a very interesting term, echoing the concept of fashionista, which is a fashion icon and role model, especially in the digital sphere. The term hijabista, which combines the term hijabi with the term fashionista and comes up with this new term, hijabista, refers to a Muslim woman who dresses stylishly, while also at the same time adhering to an array of modest apparel that coincides with Islamic dress. Some Muslim women, social media influencers today, have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of followers online on their different social media accounts, a vast audience of mostly young Muslim women who interact on digital platforms such as Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube, and Instagram. This is certainly true in the case of these fashion public opinion leaders and influencers and these fashion agenda setters who became role models for other young Muslim women to follow and to really emulate their own example. One example of a hybrid identity is this young Muslim American woman, Amani al-Khatadba, who started her own magazine, which is called Muslim Girl. And she started also a group online, which is called Fitna, the feminist Islamic troublemakers, as she calls it. And as you can tell from the name and from her own appearance, she is presenting an unconventional Muslim identity, which is hybrid. She is saying, I am a Muslim woman. At the same time, I am modern, I am feminist, I'm outspoken. And that's, again, a hybrid and diverse identity in cyberspace. Also, the hashtag Muslim Women Day, in an effort to express and assert Muslim women's diverse and hybrid gendered identities in cyberspace, an annual global campaign known as hashtag Muslim Women's Day was launched on March 27, 2017 by this young American Muslim woman, Amani al-Khatadba, in response to the Muslim travel bans that took place at the time of President Trump's presidency. And she wanted to raise the voices of Muslims at large, and especially Muslim women in particular, and to fight against their own obscurity and misrepresentation. A number of Muslim women representing different backgrounds and identities used the Twitter campaign in 2017 to propagate their own narrative of diversity, often coupled with visuals, such as attractive selfies. One example is a woman tweeting a selfie alongside the caption, "About time that we get a Muslim Women's Day. Perhaps it's a step towards being heard, inshallah," which means God willing. Traditionally unsubmissive Muslima. So you see these again as an opportunity to assert the visibility, existence, and presence of Muslim women communities online. At the same time, such events became also a forum or a place to fight against things like racism and colorism. So minority voices, those who are, for example, Black Muslims, African-American Muslims, Latinos, minority immigrants, and so on. For example, here you see these posts. Black spirituality is the Muslim revolution. Muslim women are trending, but some of us are still invisible. So it became also an opportunity to raise issues, not just of gender and feminism, but also issues of racism and colorism and fighting against discrimination based on color, race, and ethnicity. Another very important effort by American Muslims online has been countering Islamophobia. Of course, as we know, the term Islamophobia refers to the irrational fear of Islam and Muslims. Muslim users came up with the campaign hashtag Muslim Rage to counter the anti-Muslim campaign and the Islamophobic campaign, which was called hashtag Ban Islam. This hashtag highlighted the bias and hate Muslims received on an everyday basis in a humorous, witty, and satirical way. So it is worth mentioning that Muslims who took part in this campaign did not respond to the hashtag Ban Islam Islamophobic campaign with rage or anger. Rather, they started a very funny, sarcastic campaign. Like, for example, if you go on a plane and your best friend's name is Jack and you're a Muslim, don't you ever shout, "Hi, Jack," because obviously you're going to be in trouble. It used this kind of humor and this kind of jokes, which became very effective. In fact, it could be said that they were wise enough not to show any kind of anger, because if they did, this would have further promoted the angry and aggressive Muslim stereotype, which would have been harmful, detrimental, counterproductive, and would play in the hands of Islamophobes. Excuse me. examples of successful online campaigns, another famous successful example is how Muslim American women from different backgrounds and walks of life launched a Twitter campaign known as hashtag Can You Hear Us Now to respond to Trump's attack on Mr. Khizr Khan's wife. Her name was Mrs. Ghazala Khan. If you don't know the incident, it happened during the Democratic National Convention during the 2016 election. And she was standing silent on the stage beside her husband. And at that time, candidate Trump said, oh, maybe she was not allowed to talk. Nobody is giving her a chance to talk. So this campaign was started by American Muslim women online as an attempt to counter this negative portrayal of Muslim American women as silent, oppressed, and invisible, and have no voice. So some women started the campaign and started to say things like, I am a professor. If I walk in the classroom, I am the one who's allowed to talk, the only one who is allowed to talk. Hashtag, can you hear us now? And you get the idea of how they try to use this campaign to make their voices heard. Here is what the campaign looked like. This is the page on Twitter. The campaign is Muslim women. They say, can you hear us now? They use the hashtag, can you hear us now? And you can see this image from this campaign on Twitter. Another example is the Twitter campaign hashtag Muslims report stuff, which was another very funny and very witty campaign that used humor by, again, the American Muslims in order to fight back against Islamophobia. And they started to have a campaign that says that, we are just ordinary people. So during, again, the 2016 presidential election, when a young woman asked candidate Trump, what are you going to do about Islamophobia? He answered her saying, well, you Muslims, if you see something, you should say something. You should report whatever you see. So Muslims starts this campaign, hashtag Muslims report stuff on social media in order to push back against the idea, the Islamophobic notion that there is something unusual, different, or suspicious happening in their communities. So they will say something like, my mom cooks the same food every single day. I'm going to report her to the authorities. Hashtag Muslims report stuff. So they try to use humor again in a very witty way in order to get the message across. Another very interesting and successful campaign was the Islamophobia pill, and that was started by CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, when they actually came with this box that is called Islamophobia, just like ibuprofen or any other medication, which says, Islamophobia is funny, but Islamophobia is not. Take this particular medication if you have these particular symptoms: blind, intolerance, bigotry, fear of Muslims, and so on. And it says, what is Islamophobia? Actually, you take this particular, pill if you're actually suffering from irrational fear or bigotry or, just blind intolerance, and trying to explain what this, pill is all about. And the story of Islamophobia is a way to fight back against Islamophobia in a very funny and humorous way, but again, stressing the point that Islamophobia is funny, but Islamophobia is not. So concluding remarks, these new trends illustrate a unique amalgamation of multidimensional activities in cyberspace, signaling both the complexity and hybridity of these new digitalized mediated spaces on one hand, as well as the identities and agencies competing within them on the other hand. These new positions of in-betweenness, middle ground in cyberspace cross-cut the boundaries between localization and globalization, tradition and modernity, the online and the offline, the private and the public, the national and the international, the social and the political, as well as the secular and the religious. These push and pull mechanisms within and between these various spheres will continue to shape and reflect modern Muslims' complex realities, shifting identities, hybrid narratives, and forms of religious authority within the equally dynamic and hybrid world of cyberspace. And with that, thank you so much. And I'm more than happy to take any questions or comments you have. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any question online, you can raise your hand. And is there any question from the in-person participants?
Sure. I have a question. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can hear you, but if you can also raise your voice a little bit, that would help.
Sure, of course, thank you. Very interesting, and I love the aspects of humor. And I was just wondering, I work a little bit with online communities myself, although, and that intersect with Irish language. So, you know, some similarities, a lot of differences, but I was wondering, we have some similar areas where, you know, when you're dealing with authorities and like you mentioned, these cyber worlds offer decentralization and new forms of authority. How are traditional authorities responding to that? From my own perspective, sometimes there can be purists in the Irish language world who resist, you know, their authority being watered down as they would see it. But have you seen anything similar or?
Yeah, thank you so much for your appreciation of the talk and also for this very good question. Indeed, there is a lot of push and pull mechanism. And we can say that, you know, it's not like, oh, everybody's going to be happy about new voices and young people coming in the picture and, you know, creating their own campaigns and expressing their own identities. Because like you can really tell, many of these are, you know, non-conventional, outside of the box, non-orthodox, right? Some of them have not even been trained in traditional religious institutions, and therefore they're seen by the traditional scholars as quote unquote outsiders, right? Outsiders to the religious tradition as they define it. And therefore that's where the resistance comes in. And of course, you do have some of the traditional scholars, you know, frowning upon some of these new phenomena. For example, the phenomena of ijtihad or reinterpretation of religious text. Somebody can look at you and say, okay, are you a scholar who actually graduated from, you know, a certified classical Islamic institution like Al-Azhar in Cairo? If not, how can you even dare to enter this field of religious reinterpretation? Who are you? Why would we even trust you or believe what you tell us? Right? So that can be a sentiment. A phenomena like hijabistas, these young women who are saying, oh, I can be a modest woman, I can dress modestly, but I can be stylish at the same time. You can see some young fans who love this whole phenomenon and say, this is wonderful. You know, being religious doesn't mean that you have to wear, you know, something which is not, you know, color matching or attractive or elegant. You can still be elegant and attractive and pious. And then there are others, you know, older generation, more traditional people who are like, wait a minute. I mean, if you're so stylish, how can you still remain modest? You know, so you are seeing all of these push and pull dynamics, and definitely a lot of that creates tensions within the Muslim communities for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Is there any question from the online participants? If you have a question, you can type your question in the Q&A box or raise your hand. I will get you on the podium.
I can ask another question if people are thinking and formulating. Oh, there's one, I think, in the chat.
What is the most important factor for Islam to develop using this digital media? What is the most important factor for Islam to develop using these social media? I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I will try to, you know, to be okay. Okay, welcome. Thank you so much. Yes, I think that, you know, there are so many different ways through the digital spaces and social media spaces could be used. One way, of course, is to come up with new reinterpretations of religious text. You know, I saw a religious program the other day, and the scholar was asked, why didn't the Prophet, peace be upon him, offer his own tafsir or interpretation of the Quran, of the Holy Quran? And the answer was, because if he did, then there will be just one single, solid, you know, uniform interpretation, and that would close the door for other forms of interpretations in the plural. So I think that one thing that we can work on, especially those who are, you know, scholars of Islamic studies and those who have in-depth knowledge of Islam, is definitely the area of reinterpretation or ijtihad. But of course, it has to be also based on grounding in the scholarly traditions of Quran, hadith, tafsir, and other forms of Islamic knowledge. Another thing that I personally find interesting is this expression of new and modern and hybrid Muslim identities. Maybe some of my presentation focused on you know, young women, because I'm also a scholar of women's studies and gender studies. And I believe in Islamic feminism, that a woman can be a Muslim and a feminist at the same time. I don't see these terms as mutually exclusive. Some people believe this is controversial. How can you be a Muslim and a feminist at the same time? I personally think that as long as you are upholding your own religious beliefs and upholding the values of gender equity and women's rights, you can also create this kind of blend. But just focusing on women does not mean that young men are not also participating and creating very interesting phenomena and mechanisms online. We now have a lot of young scholars, both male and female, who are presenting their own views and ideas. They're becoming more technologically savvy and filling a lot of the gaps and the void I've been talking about. I said when I co-authored my first book back in 2009, we noticed the absence of a lot of young scholars, a lot of ulama or scholars were outside of the picture. They were not there on social media. Either they don't have digital literacy, they don't have linguistic capacity or cultural capacity, or all of the above. Now the picture is different. You are seeing more and more young Muslim scholars, both male and female, who are now having their voices heard online. And that in and of itself is important because it's going to shape the awareness and the knowledge of young Muslim generations, both at home and in the diaspora. I hope that that was the answer to the question and that I really got what you mean correctly and accurately. And thank you so much for this good question.
Thank you. Is there any question from the in-person participant?
You kind of answered the other question I had just there, but very interesting. What I was going to mention was the other aspect. I mean, the converse of what I had mentioned of the kind of resistance to it was that in my own research, I see sometimes that the cyberspace, because what I engage with is an endangered language, is a breathing space for people who might feel pressure. And it sounds like that can be an area as well for people to network who have interests. And I think you've already kind of answered this, but I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I want to add something here, which is very important, because this can be a double-edged sword, right? The cyberspace can be a way for you to find like-minded people who share your own views, your own ideas, your own thoughts, your way of looking at religion, and your way of looking at life more broadly, right? And that can be a very good opportunity. And we have seen some examples of that, women creating their own discussion forums, right? And some of these discussion forums don't just talk about religious issues. They talk about life, they talk about marriage, they talk about children, about education, about, just everyday life issues. And that's fantastic. Now, the downside is sometimes people also tend to create their own bubbles in cyberspace. They create what is called the echo chambers, right? So the echo chamber, basically, I'm going to only interact with people who look like me, act like me, believe like me, think like me. That is very dangerous, and that creates polarization. And that is something that myself and my co-author actually found in the book Islam.com. When we analyzed the data, we looked like, oh my God, this is really very interesting, because we did not see a lot of useful middle ground deliberations. Like, deliberations where people try to come to the middle, right? You have one view, I have a different view, but maybe we agree on some things and we can come to the middle ground. We didn't see a lot of that. We saw the two extremes, the extreme of complete polarization. People go to the extremes. They don't tolerate the other party. They're against the other party. We cannot accept each other, or creating their own bubbles and echo chambers, and they're only listening to people who look like them and think like them. Of course, what Habermas calls the Habermasian sphere of, critical dialogue and deliberation, a lot of that is very idealistic. And that was one of the findings of the book, actually. And we did not find a lot of evidence to support the existence of this useful, healthy middle ground of deliberation. And I'm afraid that fast forward to 2024, this still remains to be the case. And not just among Muslims. I mean, look at politics, right? In the United States, in many parts of the world, it's like, my way or the highway. Either you think like me or you become my enemy. There is a lot of polarization and division. And I don't think that social media is helping in terms of bridging some of these differences and some of these gaps, unfortunately.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Is there any question from the online attendees? If no, I think this is this session. And there is another message.
Yes, if you
Okay.
can read it in full, please, if you don't mind, because I can
Yeah,
only see part of
I
it.
will leave it here if you want to connect it later. Our next session about the nuclear weapon is canceled by the presenter. So we will meet later at the room 2 at 3:30 for the next session. Thank you for coming today. And
May I just, before you end, please share my email with everyone who would like
yeah,
to
of
get in
course,
touch with
if-
me. I mean, there have been excellent questions and comments. So shall I just type it in the chat? Would that be okay? Or do you want me to say it verbally, or do you want to share it with everyone yourself?
you can type it in the chat and share it to everyone. And if you want to stay connected with Ms. Saha, and you will find her email in the chat box.
Okay, so I just typed my email now, and you can see it here in the chat box. If you have any comment, any question, anything that you did not have a chance or time to ask me, please feel free to reach out to me by email. I'd be more than happy to receive your email and to answer any questions or feedback or comments that you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.